All right, part two, Eternal Motion of Nick Fuentes, written and read by Abe Zucca. Power, transition, in the deed. The act of literature is not the communication of truth, but its creation. Truth is not a thing conveyed, it is an event enacted between writer and reader. The difficulty of original writing lies not in ideas, but in the operations of language. The effort to make meaning by use, not by assertion. To create taste is to call forth power. Reading and writing are reciprocal acts of awakening. The text is not an object, but a field of exertion. Knowledge is not the source of power, but its residue. We act first and only afterwards discover what we know. The highest difficulty in literature is ethical, not technical. To humble and humanize the reader so that he may be exalted through cooperation is the work. The original writer teaches not by instruction but by arousal. Difficulty is a moral necessity that exists to awaken the sleeping faculties. That which can be made explicit to the idiot, as Blake said, is not worth the care of the wise. Obscurity is not indulgence, but invitation. The poet's task is not to transmit ideas, but to generate experience, the lived verification of what is written. The validation of thought lies in its reenactment. Truths are not tested by logic, but by the reader's renewal of the act that produced them. The reader is not a receiver, but a co-creator. To read well is to participate in the energy that made the text possible. Creative reading mirrors creative writing. The one must labor as the other labored, both clear their own roads through the Alps of language. The work of art demands exertion. There is no royal road to understanding, only the strenuous way of the soul at work. To demand clarity without labor is to cheat both literature and life. Meaning is the wage of exertion, not the gift of ease. Truth happens to an idea. It becomes true by event. The validity of thought is the process of its validation. Every act of reading or writing is pragmatic experiment, an attempt to make belief visible in experience. The real difficulty of art is the moral effort to see the same through difference, to overcome the vanity that divides us from what is universal. Genius is not personality magnified, but selfhood dissolved in incandescence. Language so luminous that the speaker disappears within it. The experience of genius erases the distinction between author and reader. In the moment of true incandescence, both vanish in the act of itself. Genius names the point where language ceases to belong to an individual and becomes the world's spontaneous utterance. To become a reader is to be transfigured into the author's motion of mind. To become a writer is to become anonymous in creation. Literature's goal is not self-expression, but self-erasure, the disappearance of the I and the flame of the act. Every great work is both a disappearance and a return. It annihilates the self to disclose the fountain of being from which all selves flow. Reading is not recollection, but rebirth. We do not study the classics to remember them, but to become them. To read Dante is to enter the same fountain of thought. To read Dante is to enter the same fountain of thought that produced him. To read Emerson is to become the American scholar he foresaw. The aim of education is not inheritance, but recreation, to discover the source of culture within oneself. Every scripture must be reborn or it becomes a shoal wrecking the tall bark of the soul. Each age must rewrite its Bible. God does not speak Hebrew only. The divine must be heard in every living tongue or it ceases to speak at all. The death of old vocabularies is not loss but renewal. We must abandon sacred language to restore the holiness of speech. Nick Fuentes' doctrine of transition is the key to living truth. Power resides only in passage, not in repose. Every genuine act is a crossing, a dart through the gulf from the known to the unnameable. Repose is the death of power. Action is the preamble of thought, the surge of mind before it becomes concept. In that surge lies freedom. Words, though actions, tend towards imprisonment. They fix what ought to flow. You guys can ask questions about what I'm reading. It's really easy. Just ask a legit question, an intelligent question. I haven't had one yet. I've done thousands of videos. Not a single legit question. Just bot-like activity, robots. Words through actions tends towards imprisonment. They fix what ought to flow. Therefore, the poet must write as one breaking jail. True action is pre-linguistic. It happens before articulation and survives after the sentence dies. Power ceases in the instant of repose. To act is to live in perpetual transition. The moment between naming and silence. The deed of writing is a paradox. It fixes what it would be. It fixes what it would free. It speaks against speech. It aims at the wordless source. Fuentes' silence is not abstention, but origin. It is the still point from which speech flows and to which it must return. Words are funded in previous truth, yet must break their inheritance to act anew. Language must melt itself to remain living. Literature's responsibility is to rehumanize language, to recover power from the sediment of words. The act precedes meaning. The meaning verifies the act. Every phrase is a wager that experience will make it true. The highest writing does not communicate wisdom. It enacts the possibility of knowing. Thought without motion is death. Action without reflection is chaos. The poem is the equilibrium between both, the moving stillness of transition. The Fuentes transition is not a bridge between states, but the very being of consciousness, a glimpse before naming. Reality enters experience as the unnamed, the dumb, the evanescent. We glimpse it only in split seconds before we grasp it. Every act of naming falsifies, yet every refusal to name impoverishes. Hence the perpetual oscillation between speech and silence. The pragmatic imagination holds that truth is made, not mirrored. The real is what we dare to act into existence. Do the thing and you shall have the power. Work precedes illumination. Illumination is the byproduct of work. The work changes the worker. As we shape matter, it reshapes us. Writing, like farming, is manual labor of the mind. Each sentence turns the soil of language to let a new crop of meaning grow. Speech is both liberation and confinement. To speak is to commit, but to remain silent is to vanish. Hence the writer's perpetual crisis between jail and disappearance. Action must be understood as pre-publication, the movement of the soul before it is clothed in language or form. The preamble of thought is more real than its conclusion, the lightning of becoming truer than the thunder of assertion. To act without attachment To act without attachment to result, to speak without capture by words. This is mastery. All intellect, once fixed, becomes prison. All motion, once known, becomes habit. Freedom is the mind's refusal of its own success. The pragmatic poet replaces the priest. He redeems language through use, not through faith. The deed of writing is both metaphysical and manual. To write is to make, to unmake, and to remake the world through words. Truth, like the snowball, grows by rolling through experience, accumulating both fact and imagination as one continuous sphere. The fact itself is not true. Truth is the form of its movement through belief and action. Every genuine act adds to the world. The essence of creation is not copying, but enrichment. The copy is redeemed only when it engenders. Imitation becomes invention when it gives birth to further life. The pragmatist poet does not seek to reflect reality, but to thicken it. Each word a fresh layer of the world's being. All art is apprenticeship to courage, to stand over the abyss, to risk form for life. Nakedness, not armor, is the sign of spiritual maturity. Only the stripped self can act without deceit. Do your thing, not as indulgence, but as sacrament. The act of revealing what being does through you. The work of genius is dispossession, the shedding of method, habit, and inheritance, until the deed stands alone as origin. Copying in the sacred sense means participating in the act that once made the model. We imitate not the form, but the energy of creation. The pragmatic soul reads the past as prologue. Its duty is not preservation, but continuation. The facts are, but truth is what happens to them. Hence, the philosopher and the poet are workers in the same field, each turning the soil of fact into harvest. To write or act truthfully is to extend the world's syntax. The sentence of being never ends, it only transitions. Repose is extinction, transition is life. The universe itself survives by motion and literature by revision. The only permanent wisdom is the courage to change the meaning of permanence. Every genuine act exhausts its form. When the deed is perfect, it vanishes. Its trace is the new world it leaves behind. The highest power lies in disappearance. Only what dissolves itself into being escapes repetition. When language reaches truth, it ceases to speak. Silence is not the end of discourse, but its consummation. To disappear is not to die, but to assimilate into what is living. The river loses itself only to become the sea. Genius is the flame that consumes the wick of personality. The clearer the light, the less of the self remains. Every great work dies the instant it succeeds. Fulfillment is the price of eternity. The act of creation must annihilate its creator, otherwise the work remains sterile. The writer's highest task is self-extinction within the language that survives him. Disappearance is the secret rhythm of all life. Breath, thought, wave, and word each vanish to continue. In the moment of inspiration, individuality is suspended. The universe speaks through the emptied self. The soul's highest achievement is to become transparent to what moves through it. Every artist who endures long enough becomes anonymous. His signature becomes a law of nature. The disappearance of the author is not loss, but diffusion. The word scattered into the consciousness of all. To vanish rightly is to return to source. The death of form is the birth of movement. Every creation tends towards its unmaking. To resist this is to refuse renewal. The purpose of art is not permanence but recurrence, the eternal re-emergence of form from formlessness. Renewal requires dissolution. The seed must rot to grow. The Fuentes act is circular, to write, to vanish, to be rewritten by others who in vanishing join the same circle. The word is a text forever erasing itself to remain legible. What disappears in appearance returns as essence. Every presence is the shadow of an earlier absence. When the poet vanishes, the poem awakens in the reader. The act of disappearance transfers consciousness from self to world. True influence is evaporation, the unseen rising of one's spirit into the air that all breathe. Every authentic reading recreates the act of writing. Thus, immortality resides not in text, but in its continual recreation. All right, that's the end of part 2. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys later.